Parikh, in his book Rethinking Multiculturalism, Cultural Diversity and Political Theory. He proposes certain ways of looking at multiculturalism. And what he proposed was very innovative and with minimum number of concepts. And very comprehensive and extremely relevant for our times. So, very useful theory he proposes, and also correcting the previous mistakes. So, this indeed is rethinking on multiculturalism. And one reason why he could think very differently and innovatively was the fact that he was from India. He was born in Gujarat and he was exposed to cultural diversity within India. And later he observed diversity in UK and in Canada, and he settled as a British political theorist, and now as a Labour Party member of House of Lords. So what does he say about multiculturalism? First, one has to look at what he said about relationship of man with his culture. He takes man as embedded in culture or in his society. Man is embedded, and man takes from culture many things. His identity first, security, habits, beliefs, morals, meaning he gives to life, and idea of good life. So, man is embedded in his culture. One may ask, so what? And more importantly, who has said man is not embedded? Is it not too obvious? Actually, it is not so obvious. Why so? Factually it is obvious, but thinking differently, it is not so obvious. Take for example, liberalism. Liberalism is the basis for democracies. And India also is an example of democracy following liberalism. And what does liberalism say? It often says it takes individual, no individual to be discriminated regardless of caste, religion, like this. No individual should be discriminated regardless of. So, essentially, group membership is the source of discrimination, and so there should not be any discrimination. Liberalism targets individual. Liberalism targets citizen and not his group. Liberalism is based on individuality. So, political theory of liberalism is looking at man and not the culture part. So, Parikh is arguing that man comes with his culture embedded. So, a political theory should accept this fact of an individual being embedded in culture. So, he is bringing the obvious and the common sense to the theory. That is what his contribution is. Not that we didn't know that man is a part of culture, but he is bringing that to political theory. And let us see what its implications are. Next thing is, what is culture? There are many theories who accepted culture. For example, to anthropology, study of culture is very important. But then many thinkers took culture as given, as one, as monolithic, as fixed. But Parikh says this is not true. Within a culture, there is diversity. Okay. There is diversity within a culture. Gay culture, lesbian culture is different from the total culture. So, it means there are groups which disagree with certain aspects of culture. So, he calls it subcultural diversity. Those who disagree with certain aspects of culture. And there are some people who disagree not simply with certain aspects of the culture, but certain core principles of culture. So, there are differences in terms of perspectives, the diversity of perspectives. So, socialists may think in a particular way. Environmentalist will think in a particular way. Radical feminists will think in a particular way. And how Parekh uses this diversity is that he recognizes the fact that it is not uniform, and there are different perspectives, disagreements, which means it is not perfect, which means it will change, and it has been changing. And change is not bad. Change is desirable. So culture is good in certain ways, and for some people, but not good for everybody, and for always and always. Again, people may know this, but Parekh uses the fact of this diversity within culture and cultural change to articulate an idea that culture should change, and nothing sacred about it. For example, some anthropologists know that the culture is integrated, and they think that they shouldn't disturb it easily. And so there are debates regarding whether some culture should be isolated and whether development is possible and things like that. But Parekh takes a more activist approach that culture is for change, but change for better. So which means cultures are not final, they should change. And how should they change? Through interaction and through dialogue. Now, if this is the view of man's relationship with culture, and also this is the nature of the culture, what does it mean to be a multicultural society? In a multicultural society, different cultures are forming a unity or one. So he says multicultural society should mean C1, C2, C3, C4. Are bringing their cultures, and this can be nation's culture. Okay, but does it mean national culture is C1 plus C2 plus C3 plus C4? It is not like that. It is not simply addition. National culture is different. This is affected by C3, C4, affected by. It draws from C4, but it has its own values, morals, symbols. It has a constitution. So it respects diversity, and it accepts. And again, like C1, C2, C3, C4 are not final, national culture also is not final. So which means it is N1 now coming from C1, C2, C3, C4. After 20 years, C1 will be C1 dash, C2 dash, C3 dash, C4 dash, and this will be N2. So, cultures make up and change the nation's culture. So, and look at who are they. And the theory is so comprehensive that these cultures can come from different sources. It can be from a tribe, it can be from a caste, it can be from a religion, it can be from language, it can be from locality, sub-regional cultures. So they are coming and shaping, in the context of India, what is Indian? So what is Indian in 1960 is not the same thing as what is Indian in 2020. So culture is for change, either the national culture or the cultures of other societies. And what is the uniqueness in thinking of nation culture in this way? Because Parikh found that in liberal democracies, national culture, like in US he was talking, like in UK he was talking about, is based on liberalism. Liberalism is based on individuality, equality, reason, as opposed to group, hierarchy, tradition. This can be culture of one particular group, but liberalism looks at like this. A constitution may have been framed in this way, but Parekh asks, don't look at cultures from liberalism as the basis. Accept liberalism also a set of ideas, maybe somewhat superior, but don't take them as absolute truths. And so, don't impose. So the point is, don't look at other cultures from the viewpoint of liberalism. So Muslim lifestyle is wrong because women are treated this way or like this. But does it mean that liberalism is as good as others? No. One can look at from liberalism certain human rights, domination, is unhelpful. Freedom is better. But judging from liberalism, imposing liberalism on everybody is not multiculturalism. Liberalism can be used to arrive at certain common set of values. So there can be prioritization to this common national culture, and particularly in a liberal democracy. But on the basis of liberalism, if you look at every culture and you will find it wanting, and then you say those cultures should change. That is not multiculturalism. So Parekh prioritizes democracy, which meant liberalism, but he thinks that should not be imposed, which means there should be a dialogue. Dialogue across and dialogue with. There should be give and take. So N1 can modify and C1 can modify C2, C3, C4 like this. Dialogue, give and take, a kind of a balance. Balance that enhances the well-being of all. Okay. And then he says, in a multicultural society, political institutions should be represented. So within the institutions of N1, there should be people from C1, C2, C3, C4. Why? If there are people from different cultural backgrounds, then they are likely to respect diverse cultures. And also these cultures are likely to respect national institutions. So their legitimacy of national institutions will improve. And national institutions are likely to follow multicultural policies. So it is not simply cultural tolerance, but cultural change of all, not simply one. So it is not assimilation. And then it is not simply cultural, there should be economic participation, political participation. Then economic and political participation, then these groups are likely to feel this is theirs or ours. If you exclude them in political and economic structures, then that creates the issue of national integration. They become marginalized, and when they become marginalized, there can be conflict, violence. It can be secessionism or terrorism. So this is his theory of multiculturalism. It's a rethinking of multiculturalism. Okay. And then he says Multiculturalism is a contemporary issue, though the fact of it is old. So diversity was there before, but diverse groups putting demands on their participation is something new. And that is why multiculturalism as an ideology becomes more important also because of migration and globalization, but also because of spread of democracy, where the groups are asserting their role. So this is what he says. Multicultural society is the one that includes two or more cultural communities. Multiculturality is the fact and multiculturalism is a normative response. Multiculturality is a fact. This fact had been age old. He says this: although Turkey under Ottoman Empire had fairly large Christian and Jewish communities and granted them far greater autonomy than do most contemporary societies, it was not and never saw itself as a multicultural society. It was basically a Muslim society which happened to include non-Muslim minorities. It followed the Islamic ideals and was run by Muslims, who alone enjoyed all full rights of citizenship, the rest enjoying extensive cultural autonomy but few political rights. So diversity at that time meant cultural autonomy but few political rights. But this is no longer the case. First of all, autonomy is difficult because the nation is entering into many areas of the society. That is one. And also, societies are demanding political rights. So economic and political integration and migration and the spread of democracy are creating stress across cultures. You can think in terms of ethnic violence, Islamism, terrorism, at certain places secessionism. So he says contemporary multiculturality is more defiant. It's defiant. So this makes his theory extremely important. And he uses these words. He says, those who didn't think culture should change and would change made these assumptions. He called them the culturalists. Culturalists naturalized culture, seeing it as an unalterable and ahistorical fact of life, which is so determined its members as to turn them into a distinct species. This he calls culturalism and he rejects. Culture is not static. Not only that it changes, but Parekh's point is that it should change. And what did liberalism assume? Liberalism assumed certain things about human nature, and then they said that is final. That he calls naturalism. He says neither naturalism nor culturalism gives a coherent account of human life. Man has the nature, that is, within man there is a universal aspect, and within man there is a cultural aspect. Culture is not final. That there are universal facts of human existence, human nature. So two distinct cultures can talk. So dialogue is possible. Certain common values possible. So he says we should appreciate the dialectical interplay of nature and culture, of shared humanity and cultural differences and privilege neither. Don't privilege naturalism, don't privilege culturalism. It is an interplay between human nature and culture. Culture doesn't fully satisfy a human being. Culture satisfies some aspects of human life, and there are some aspects which are not satisfied. And that becomes the source for change. So there is a culture. He is satisfied with certain aspects, but he is not satisfied with some aspects. So he wants to change. And how does he change? He wants to take from C2. And when C1, C2 interact, they create a particular kind of a fusion. So no culture is perfect, no culture satisfies what all human beings want. Some cultures may focus more on freedom, some cultures may focus more on order, but some individuals want more freedom, some individuals want more order. So cultural exchange is important. So in this context, he says liberalism is not enough, because it is judging all other cultures from the perspective of liberalism. One also gives the liberal the supreme double advantage of setting non-liberals at the challenging task of defending their principles to their opponent's satisfaction, while more or less exempting themselves from it. So liberals are not to be criticized by others. Others only have to defend themselves how far they are up to liberalism. Okay. So that is his assessment. And in a multicultural society, we need a conceptual framework, a political theory that rises above the liberal non-liberal divide by articulating itself at a higher level of abstraction and providing a language in terms of which liberals and non-liberals and those who are both or neither can express and resolve their differences. This is only the most basic task. This is one of the most basic tasks facing political theory of the multicultural society. So that was the task, and I think Parekh met the task. He gave the tools by which we can think about creating better societies.